we're focusing on a simple but critical issue today. Why are Indian cities increasingly shrinking in space for pedestrian or walkers? And it's happening all around us. Now, people, including young children, are risking their lives trying to jostle for a simple walk from school or from a station, even bus stands. The visuals you're seeing out of Mumbai outside Dadar station and around Worli's BMC school, which is a government school. The walkers, including school children, have no option but to use the road as the footpaths have gone entirely missing or have been gobbled up by shops and hawkers. I decided to walk from my home in South Delhi to the closest metro station in horse cars and found an apology of a footpath all dug up or at least broken in parts, taken over by two-wheelers for parking or even expanded shops. One needs to really cross a busy road to walk towards the Hoskars metro station. And guess what? Pedestrians are expected to take a foot-over bridge to make this crossing. When we went there, we found the lift shuttered and the foot-over bridge abandoned. No one uses it. Instead, people dodge fast-moving traffic to get to the other side. Now, should we not be asking the authorities who built this monstrous steel structure, why are people who are using their 2 good feet and adding to no air pollution, in fact, making the city sustainable, why are they expected to work the hardest? Why should they have to climb 4 flights of stairs to make a simple crossing? Only because cars, buses and two-wheelers need to keep moving freely. Now, I'm going to read out some statistics which I did not actually find surprising at all. This is India's alarming pedestrian safety crisis. Data released by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways says over 29,000 pedestrians were killed in accidents in 2021. These are road accidents. The number of walkers or pedestrians killed in road accidents rose to 32,800 plus in 2022, which is a 13% increase year on year. According to the Bosch Limited report, India's pedestrian fatalities in 2021 exceeded that of European Union and Japan combined. Nearly 99% of Indian pedestrians, I might as well say 100%, are at a risk of road injuries, says the same report. So what should we be doing? This is the only country where we actually have pedestrians stopping for vehicles. Let me bring in my panel here and ask them some important questions. Anumita Roychowdhury, Executive Director, Centre for Science and Environment, New Delhi, is with us. We also have with us Anupam Yog. He is a Managing Partner of XDG Laboratories, Singapore, or XDG Labs, pardon me. Mr Vivek Pai, Director, Sustainancy Consultants Pvt Ltd, is also with us. Thank you so much for joining me, Anumita. If I look at just Delhi and you saw the visuals, 40% plus of all road accident deaths in Delhi were of pedestrians. It's an extremely high number. And, if I go back into the history of city planning in India, there's been a clear shift in the 1960s. All your comprehensive traffic and transport studies have now started prioritizing motorized transport. Am I correct in this understanding?
Absolutely, Manisha. And just try to understand that if you really look at the census data of India, 42% of our daily travel trips are actually walk trips, and it's 34% in Delhi. And yet, we do not celebrate that number and protect that number because many of us, and especially the urban middle class, we do not walk by choice anymore. But those who are walking are the captive walkers because they cannot afford anything else but only that, to walk. In fact, one of our studies in 2018 showed that 1/3 of Delhi, 34% of Delhiites, they walk because they cannot afford even the minimum bus fare in Delhi. So just understand that what is that challenge all about. So therefore, this is the class that can be neglected and ignored. Keeping in mind and understand the vulnerable section of that walking community, 58% of our daily walk trips in Delhi are the education trips, which means our children, our youth, who are the most vulnerable to road fatalities today, and the road safety.
My God.
And then the urban poor, 77% of them who walk. So clearly, And understand if today, because of air pollution, because of climate change, if we have to increase the share of public transport, but every public transport trip begins and ends as a walk trip. And if you make walking difficult, you will not do that. And it is compromising not only our environment, but our health. That's why WHO calls walking active mobility, which is important not only for clean air, but also for our personal health. We do not have to rush to a gym to be healthy, but we need a walkable city.
Absolutely. And you've really made us think that, look, the people who are walking are at the bottom of the economic pyramid. And probably that's why they can be ignored. Anupam, I'm going to come to you. You've lived in Gurugram. It's a brand new city which has come up in the last 3 decades, right? That city is literally keeps pedestrians and walkers zero in mind. I mean, I think they've just completely been ignored. So you may announce a new Gurgaon metro expansion, but ultimately there's no option to walk in Gurgaon. Anything that you see in terms of new infrastructure coming is only to make motors or motor traffic smoother.
Thank you, Manisha. First of all, thank you for having me here. I think it may be useful to reframe this a little bit in the sense that when we think of mobility, we have to also think it in the context of the nation and where it's going, which is development and prosperity. So we have to harmonize these two ideas. And when I think we start looking at one segment of the population alone, we may be challenged to find holistic solutions. So I have absolutely no disagreement with anything that's been projected, but I just think we have to make mobility far more attractive as a system. Ultimately, we are moving a lot more than we were moving 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There are many more people moving, and I think that's a good thing. So one, we need to celebrate that we have a lot more prosperity, and that involves everyone from the top to the bottom of the pyramid, as you had called it. And I think the second thing is we've got to think of transport in terms of access and connectivity. So that doesn't just include the pavements or the roads. It includes the connections which are being made on either end of those journeys. Ultimately, we have to think in terms of people, the journeys they are making. These journeys have to become far more nourishing and holistic. They shouldn't be thought of in terms of just efficiency and speed, and certainly not speed in the sense of just fast. So we have to think of in terms of fast and slow. We have to think of in terms of experience and efficiency so that we can make mobility a pleasurable experience for everyone. Whether I have a choice or not, I do think that it is imperative for us to think of our cities as places for the many, not just the few. And that puts in creative demand on planners, on real estate developers, on policymakers, fundamentally everyone, to think coherently about mobility as a system that needs to be keeping up with the times and is in line with the vision of a prosperous nation.
Fair enough. Everyone. What you're saying is that, look, it's a prosperous nation. It's good to know that there are more vehicles, there's more motorization, and everybody is rising with the rising boat. So look at mobility and make it comfortable for everyone. Vivek, but am I not correct in my understanding that somehow planners seem to have missed the pedestrians? I think with rising prosperity, the number of vehicles which are being bought, whether you look at the mass or rapid transportation systems or infrastructure like Mumbai Trans Harbour Link, for example, that also has this big criticism that, it's encouraging private car usage more and more rather than really public bus usage. Just give me a sense of where you stand on this matter, that we are somehow ignoring footpaths, something as simple as footpaths. They are broken as a system and they need urgent attention.
Absolutely. In fact, while the other speakers was talking about this, I was really thinking about equitable road space usage, right? I mean, there's something called as equitable distribution of road space. And, in a place like Mumbai, where I belong to, around 50 to 60% of people walk every day. Whereas the road space and the lack of it, it's like, almost maybe 10% or 5% is left for the footpath, and that too is not continuous. with most of these streets that we go to, we have a lot of obstructions, by which the footpath stops somewhere, or either it's broken, so the person is walking on the roadway. And with these large infrastructure projects, definitely there is some part of it where these could be, pedestrianized, but they are not being. So MTHL is a classic example. And uh, I mean, definitely, there are people who are from the lower incomes who really, they would, be forced to walk, and that's a large component of our cities. And on the other hand, there are people who are very much health conscious who would also love to walk. So, but because of lack of ice on the street, or the issues with the footpaths, or where we don't have footpaths, or a lot of encroachments that have happened, shops encroach the footpaths, or a lot of things happen like this. And especially in the new projects where, like a metro, which is actually going to be used by a lot of pedestrians, we don't seem to have a multimodal integration. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is choice, that whether I want to walk or not is my choice. It doesn't have to be whether I can afford to or not afford to. So that's a different thing altogether. But we need to give a choice to our people, our citizens, that if they want to, they should be able to walk.
They should be able to. All right, Vivek, I'll come back to you. Anumita, there has been, a lot of it, or a lot of the planning which is happening in Indian cities is coming from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. In 2020, the ministry came out with this directive that, every city must choose certain markets and pedestrianize them. We saw Chandni Chowk, we saw T Nagar in Chennai. All of those things are happening. But my question is that it is so tiny as a microcosm, which we are making pedestrian. What would you like to see at the policy level?
Absolutely. So see, it is quite interesting that over the last few years, we have actually seen policies taking shape which are pretty progressive, and actually giving the policy mandate that how cities need to implement their walking, cycling infrastructure, improve accessibility, and so forth. And yet, when we see the real change on ground, it is too little and too spread out. It doesn't kind of add up to make an impact. So clearly what we are finding here is that even though there are policies, but we are not tying up the state level and central level funding adequately with the overall infrastructure development. So whenever the road building happens, it is only for the carriageway. You really do not mandate that a pedestrian-friendly street design needs to be adopted. But even there, some changes have happened. Like if you take the metro policy of the Mohua the ministry, they have actually now said that the all new metro projects, they'll have to implement walking cycling infrastructure around, I think, 500 meters around the metro station, around that kind of a radius. Now, how much of that is getting implemented? That's what we really need to see. But the question is that it is not about just making one pedestrian way, one cycle track. It has to be about network. We do not walk along the arterial road forever. That can be recreation, cycling, or walking. But we need, at a neighborhood scale, very walkable network. Now, if you look, Delhi actually has come up with a draft walkability policy. And it said that about 40% of the road length in Delhi has no footpaths. Now, the policy is actually saying identify area-wide network and then develop. Somewhat has happened, but it is still very corridor-based. It is not network-based. It doesn't help us to access. So therefore, the question is, like in Delhi, just give you the opportunity that we have, despite all the doomsday that we are talking about. The metro, after entire metro is implemented, it is said that about 60% of the Delhiites will be within 15 minutes of the walking distance from a metro station.
Absolutely.
Just understand the power of that change. Now, we have to therefore transform our neighborhood, but then we are making gated communities. You put walls all around, and you cannot have the direct access to the metro station. So it doesn't work that way. So it is not just about road design. Yes, that has to change, but also overall urban design, and therefore the transit-oriented development policy of the ministry also is very important.
But what I'm glad to hear is that at least on paper, this conversation has started. 500 meters, I'll be at my home. I'll never have to take from a metro. I just simply will not have to take either an auto or a car to reach a metro station. Stay with us. There are global examples where they don't have to, jostle or juxtapose between development. Should we have roads or should we have pedestrian footpaths? Should we have cycling spaces? There are cities which have done it all. We're going to come back and talk about them and find out what can we borrow. What are some of the global best practices? Stay with us. According to the research published by IIT Delhi, India has 45 million daily pedestrians or walkers, which is a far higher number than those who use some mode of transport. Yet, when you look at India's top cities, a majority of new infrastructure seems to be prioritizing motorization. Anupam Yog, we've discussed a lot in the top segment. We've narrowed down the problem. Give me a global perspective that what are some of the global cities doing and how are they getting it right? They have cars, they have growth, they have pedestrians, they have cyclists, and everyone has space.
Thank you, Manisha, for that question. I think it's certainly valid to look at examples of places which have succeeded in implementing some policies that subordinate movement of vehicles over people. The best example is my adopted home, Singapore, which introduced the idea of congestion pricing a long time ago, which subsequently became popular in places like London. But there are also places like Medellin in Colombia, which uses an enormous diversity of modes to connect its informal settlements to the city center, right from cable cars to monorails to tram. And I think it goes beyond modes. It really is an understanding of habitats as places which need to connect people and which need to connect people to places, whether it's their place of work or home or the third places that make our cities more livable and lovable. So ultimately, I think we need to look at this through the lens of place. When we are creating infrastructure, are we creating access infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure, or merely infrastructure for infrastructure's sake? Are we connecting people with nature and people with other people so that the social health of a place is growing? Or are we simply saying, yes, we can get to place A to place B in X minutes? So I think the metrics need to be both qualitative and quantitative, and the best examples of cities which continue to produce strong mobility outcomes are the ones that pivot as well. So when you look at London, it quadrupled its cycling infrastructure during the time the pandemic was happening. So it's over the last few years quadrupled its cycling infrastructure. When you look at places like Manhattan in New York, which actually has gone all pedestrian in certain places, and it's an expanding idea. We are finding that what we call global cities are actually doing things which ironically some of our cities have done in the past. So when I look at a city like Jaipur, by the way, the old walled city, it actually was the perfectly planned 5-minute city. So when I look at global examples, I would like us to caution that as we look outside, let's look in within, because we have some amazing global examples sitting right in our backyards. The Jaisalmer fort, living fort, it's a 1100-year-old fort, by the way, is a fantastic laboratory. Now, again, we have to caution ourselves to not make this too simplistic. It is a complex problem, but ultimately, I suspect we will be better off if we start shifting the narrative around problem solving to solution finding, because a lot of people have already found the solution. And so I think it's a bit of both.
or solution implementing, I would say. I think the solutions are well known. We have exemplary architects, town planners and think tanks. It's just the implementation which remains a challenge. Vivek Pai, Anupam Yog spoke about 5-minute cities, right? And the entire global debate is 15-minute walkable cities, right? In India, I think we are so densely packed. We literally do have that option to create those microcosms, isn't it?
We do, in fact. If you look at it, the one factor that affects us heavily is the weather. So, for us, sometimes, it gets tiring or it gets humid sometimes. So, people tend to avoid, during some times of the day. But then, as Anupam said, I think it is the facilities are there, the city is there, and the way the metro lines are coming up, we actually have this whole multimodal integration thing where pedestrianization is a huge part of it. So I think the facilities are there. We just need to kind of, incentivize it. So we need things like drinking water, we need street furnitures, we need shading, so that, people can actually sit and walk and, they can, when they get tired, they can drink water, kids can play, there's a lot of things that can happen, especially around school areas, metro to school or, home to school. Those kind of areas can be, strictly designed as with good urban design, with good shading and good facilities, so that more and more people start using it. If you disincentivize, motorized vehicles in certain areas, you can obviously directly incentivize, pedestrianization and cycling. And ultimately, that's where I think we have to go as a city and as a country.
Well, I mean, wonderful thoughts. And I think we'll have to wrap out there. Anumita Roychowdhury, Vivek Pai and Anupam Yog, thank you very much. I know this is a much deeper, longer discussion, but it's an important conversation. And we've touched upon most of the important points. And it's important to remember that, half of India is going to be living in urban centers by 2050. So it's healthier to walk, it's more sustainable to walk. So if we can make it safer to walk, we would have truly achieved, let's say, healthy urbanization that we all need. Thank you so much for watching and goodbye.